Sometimes the universe surprises us in ways we're not ready for. And on a quiet morning, it did exactly that. Astronomers around the world were watching a small, strange object drifting through our solar system. 3I-ATLAS. Just another interstellar visitor passing by the sun, following the same rules everything else follows. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. But then, something happened. Something so fast, so silent, so unnatural, that it left even the most confident scientists staring at their screens in disbelief. Because in one single instant, the solar wind around 3I-ATLAS collapsed. Not slowed down, not weakened, collapsed. The streaming particles that flow endlessly from the sun, the very breath of our star, suddenly bent, curved, and then went still, as if an invisible hand had wrapped around the object and shielded it from everything. At first, the reaction was simple. Someone assumed a glitch, a faulty detector, a corrupted reading. After all, the sun doesn't just stop touching something. Everyone knows that. But as more observatories checked in, one after another, across time zones and continents, a strange feeling spread through every control room. Their numbers matched. Their graphs matched. Their silence matched. The solar wind was real. The collapse was real. And whatever was happening out there wasn't supposed to happen. Picture that moment. A row of scientists leaning forward, chairs creaking, the quiet hum of machines filling the air. Everyone waiting for someone, anyone, to explain the impossible. But no explanation came. Because the truth was simple and terrifying. No natural object in the universe has ever blocked the solar wind like this. Not instantly, and not perfectly. There was no ramp up, no graceful decline, no warning, just a clean, precise cut-off, as if someone had flipped a switch. And suddenly, this small, dusty visitor from interstellar space didn't feel so small anymore. It felt like something else. Something watching, something aware. Teams went back through the data, replaying the moment again and again. The collapse wasn't gradual. It was surgical. 1 second, the solar wind pushed against the object, forming the usual tail of charged particles. The next second, the tail snapped back like it had hit a wall that shouldn't exist. The sun sends out billions of tons of particles every second. Nothing stops it. Nothing ignores it. Nothing interrupts it. Except this. The news spread quietly at first. Late-night calls between observatories, private emails marked urgent, cryptic messages sent between departments. But soon, the world's biggest space agencies got involved. NASA, ESA, JAXA, ISRO. And the tone shifted from curiosity to concern. Because the more they looked at 3I-ATLAS, the more they realized something wasn't adding up. Not just the collapsed solar wind, but tiny anomalies hiding in the background. A small vibration in the object's light curve, a slight deviation in its path, a temperature drop that didn't match any model. Every piece of the puzzle led to the same quiet question. What is this thing? One scientist described it best. He said it felt like watching the ocean freeze mid-wave, like the universe had paused in the middle of a sentence. And maybe it had, because the solar wind isn't just energy, it's information. It tells us how objects interact with the sun. It reveals their behavior, their structure, their history. But 3I-ATLAS didn't just interact with the sun. It rejected it. It refused it. almost like it didn't want to be seen or touched. And that's when someone noticed an even stranger detail. Right after the collapse, all forms of charged particles around the object dropped to nearly zero. Not just solar wind, local ions, dust, plasma. Everything went quiet, too quiet. It was as if the object was surrounded by a shell. A bubble, something that was turning the chaotic storm of space into a calm, empty pool. But why? As scientists struggled to understand the event, people tried to convince themselves it could still be natural. Some strange shadowing effect, a rare interaction, a phenomenon we hadn't seen before. But deep down, they knew better. Because nature doesn't do instant. Nature doesn't do perfect. Nature doesn't do on and off. But machines do. And for the first time, the word artificial slipped quietly into the room. No one said it out loud. Not yet, but it hung there. In the air, in the silence, in the uneasy glances passing between researchers. If this collapse wasn't natural, then what was it? A defense mechanism? A power system? A signal? A mistake? Or maybe something worse? Maybe it was intentional. Hours passed. Data came in wave after wave, and each wave only made the mystery deeper. The solar wind reached towards the object like a hand and then curled back as if meeting something invisible, an invisible boundary, a barrier. Like the object had its own skin, its own rules, its own design. And the universe tends to follow rules, predictable rules, mathematical rules. But 3I-ATLAS wasn't following anything. It was rewriting them. Astronomers began to wonder if this visitor could silence the sun itself, even for a moment. What else could it do? And that's the thought no one wanted to say out loud. Because it opened a door, one they didn't know how to close. A door that led to questions about intention, about origin, about purpose. But the biggest question was the simplest. If something out there can mute the sun, what is it trying to hide, and from who? In the days that followed, scientists would uncover more anomalies, stranger, darker, and harder to explain. But in that first moment, that silent collapse, humanity felt something it hadn't felt in a long time. A presence, not a threat, not a message, just a presence. Something old, something wandering, something that didn't want to be understood, and maybe wasn't meant to be. Because when the solar wind fell quiet around 3I-ATLAS, the universe whispered something back. A warning, a reminder, a question we weren't ready to face. What kind of force, what kind of mind can silence the sun itself? And the truth is, we still don't know. But the collapse was only the beginning, because the deeper we looked, the stranger it became. There are moments in science, quiet moments, when the universe feels like it's holding its breath. And as 3I-ATLAS drifted closer to perihelion, the point where it would pass closest to the sun, that feeling only grew stronger. Because the object wasn't just moving, it was adjusting. Almost like it wanted to arrive at a very specific place, at a very specific time. At first, no one noticed the shift. Space is noisy. Orbits wobble. Gravity pulls and twists and reshapes everything. But this wasn't noise. This wasn't a wobble. This was precision. A change so small that only a few analysts caught it. A fraction of a degree. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would alarm an average observer. But to the people tracking the object, it felt wrong. It felt intentional. The orbit didn't drift randomly, like comets normally do as they heat, spin, and shed material. Instead, it corrected itself in a clean, elegant ratio, almost like someone or something was guiding it. One of the researchers described it as watching a hand reach out and gently nudge the object back onto a perfect line. And the scary part? That line wasn't a natural one. It was too straight, too smooth, too planned. The deeper they looked, the more unsettling it became. Every new data point fell into place with machine-like accuracy, as if the object were following instructions written into its trajectory. And that's when the question rose again. The same question no one wanted to voice. Is something out there controlling this? Picture the scene behind the screens. Analysts staring at numbers that shouldn't exist. Orbit specialists double-checking equations they've trusted their entire careers. People whispering quietly, afraid to admit what the data was saying out loud. Because when a comet adjusts itself, it stops being a comet. They replayed the shift again and again. No jets of gas, no sudden bursts, no natural explanation. 3I-ATLAS simply changed direction, gently, smoothly, like a ship steering through calm water. And it always corrected in the same ratio, a perfect geometric rhythm, like a pattern, like a code. The more they ran simulations, the more it felt like the object was aware of where it was going and how it wanted to get there. It wasn't drifting, it was aiming. Slowly, something strange settled into the minds of the researchers. Not fear exactly, but a cold, heavy sense that they were watching something deliberate, something with purpose. Because when you see precision in the wild chaos of space, it means one of two things. Either you're witnessing some new kind of natural physics we've never seen before, or you're witnessing design. And design rarely happens by accident. Around the world, the tone shifted again. Specialists were called in. Government agencies requested real-time data. Private observatories were asked to keep their findings quiet, not because of panic, but because no one could explain what was happening. In the midst of all this, one small detail made everything even stranger. The corrections weren't aimed toward the sun. They were aimed around it, as if the object were trying to hit a specific point in space during its closest pass, almost like a rendezvous, as if something was waiting for it, or as if it was meant to release something at that exact point. And once that idea entered the conversation, you could feel the air shift. You could feel the unease. Because that tiny change in orbit didn't just rewrite calculations, it rewrote meaning. Comets don't navigate. Asteroids don't adjust course. Dusty rocks drifting in from interstellar space don't follow clean mathematical patterns, but machines do. And every new reading made 3I/Atlas feel less like a visitor and more like a traveler, one with instructions, one with a destination. As the object drew closer to its perihelion, the corrections became even sharper. Not big moves, never big, but tiny, perfect nudges, like a mind focusing, sharpening its aim. Some called it an anomaly, others called it a coincidence, but deep down, everyone knew. Nature doesn't do almost perfect. Only intelligence does that. Late nights blurred together. You could see the stress on the faces of the people tracking the data, their eyes locked on graphs that kept bending toward precision. One researcher said the room felt too quiet, even with machines humming all around them. like everyone was waiting for something to reveal itself, something just beyond the edge of understanding. And then came the realization that made the entire situation even more unsettling. The object wasn't adjusting to avoid anything. It wasn't reacting to gravitational pulls or solar pressure. It was correcting towards something. Its path wasn't defensive. It was purposeful. And the ratios, those small repeating numbers hidden inside every shift, they matched patterns found in engineered systems, in guidance algorithms, in navigation frameworks, not in nature. That's when someone finally said it. What if this thing isn't drifting through our system? What if it's targeting something in it? The room fell silent, because that thought, that possibility, changed everything. If 3I-ATLAS was aiming, it meant intention. If it was correcting, it meant awareness. And if it was following a ratio, a pattern, a sequence, it meant it wasn't alone. Because something designed with purpose usually comes from something else with purpose. A maker, a builder, an origin. And no one knew what that origin might be. The closer it came to the sun, the more the mystery deepened. Every hour, every correction, felt like another breadcrumb leading to a truth we weren't ready to face. A truth we still can't explain, because the universe is full of drifting objects. But only one, so far, has acted like this. Only one has steered. Only one has aimed. As scientists watched the object move into the final stretch before perihelion, a quiet question spread through every observatory. Who or what makes adjustments in deep space? There was no answer, no hint, no signal, just the same cold, perfect shift. A path that didn't bend by accident, but by intention. And as 3I-ATLAS slipped deeper into the sun's light, its orbit locked onto its mysterious target, one thought lingered like a shadow. If something out there can steer itself across the stars, what is it coming here for? And the truth was simple. No one knew. Not yet. But the closer it got to the sun, the closer we came to finding out. There are times when the universe feels alive, like it's breathing, like it's watching, and sometimes it pulses. That was the first thought that crossed the minds of the astronomers staring at the latest data coming from 3I-ATLAS. They weren't looking for anything strange. Not after the collapse. Not after the orbit shift. They just wanted something normal again. Something predictable. Something that reminded them the universe still played by the rules. But instead, they saw a heartbeat. It appeared as a tiny flicker, a rise and fall in the object's brightness. Soft at first, barely noticeable. Something you'd brush off as noise or a glitch. But it wasn't noise, and it wasn't a glitch, because it repeated, and kept repeating. Every 11 minutes. A calm, steady pulse. Imagine watching a star blink, not with random flare-ups or chaotic bursts, but with the slow, patient rhythm of something alive. That's what the data looked like. A heartbeat in the dark. It didn't make sense. Comets don't pulse. Asteroids don't flicker in perfect timing. Interstellar debris doesn't follow a schedule. But 3I-ATLAS did, and its timing was flawless. A light curve that rose, dipped, and rose again, like a gentle exhale followed by a quiet breath in. A pattern so clean that even the computers flagged it as non-random. At first, the room went quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, like everyone is afraid to break it. People leaned closer to their screens. Graphs were redrawn. Detectors recalibrated. Satellites checked and rechecked. And every time, the pulse remained. 11 minutes. 11 minutes. 11 minutes. Always the same. As if the object was sending out a single, steady message. I am here. One researcher described the moment like this. It felt like watching a machine wake up and breathe. Others weren't so sure. Some said it could still be natural. Some new kind of rotation, or a strange icy pocket opening and closing with sunlight. But no theory fit all the data. The brightness didn't line up with spinning. The pulse didn't match venting gas. The timing was too exact for thermal cycles. Every natural explanation fell apart faster than the last, and that left one question floating in the air. If this wasn't nature, what was it? The deeper they looked, the clearer the pattern became. The peak of the curve had clean edges, almost symmetrical. The dips were smooth, not chaotic. There were no random spikes or jitter between the pulses. It was organized. And organization is not a natural gift of the universe. It's the sign of intention, of something choosing when to shine, choosing when to dim. A signal, or at least the shape of one. The more data they collected, the more the light curve began to feel less like a flicker and more like communication, even though no one dared to say the word. But still, the idea grew, because when something pulses in perfect rhythm, when it holds its timing across hours and days, when it sends the same pattern no matter how much the environment changes, it starts to feel like it's trying to be noticed, like a hand waving in the dark. Some scientists began to think the pulse was linked to the object's interior, like heat building up and releasing on a schedule. Others wondered if it was reflecting light off angled surfaces, pivoting like a slow mechanical shutter. But the most unsettling theory was the one no one could ignore. The pattern looked like a heartbeat. The rise, the fall. The rise again, a slow, steady rhythm. Not the heartbeat of a living thing, but of a machine regulating itself, controlling its energy, keeping something alive inside. And that idea shook people in a way the orbit shift never did, because a course correction could be explained with a lucky burst of gas. But a heartbeat meant purpose. A heartbeat meant design. People watched the pulse through the night. Every 11 minutes, another glow, another breath, another quiet reminder that something out there was keeping time. And then someone noticed something even stranger. The pulse didn't drift. Nothing in space keeps perfect timing forever. Not stars, not planets, not comets. Everything slows down or speeds up with temperature changes, rotation changes, tidal forces, radiation, pressure. But not 3I-ATLAS. Its pulse stayed locked at exactly 11 minutes. Not a second more, not a second less. Like a clock built for space. A clock meant to endure any amount of cold, heat, radiation, or chaos. That kind of stability didn't point to a natural source. It pointed to machinery. But what kind of machine? And why would it use light, soft, gentle light, to speak? Some thought it was a beacon. Some thought it was a diagnostic pattern, like a spacecraft checking its own systems. Some even wondered if the object was wounded, and this was its version of a heartbeat fighting to keep something alive. But the question that haunted everyone was the simplest. Is this a natural echo, or a signal waiting to be heard? If it was natural, it would eventually break its rhythm. If it was artificial, it would keep breathing in the dark. And so far, it hadn't missed a single beat. The pulse continued as the object drifted deeper into sunlight, growing brighter, clearer, more defined. Every new dataset made the pattern sharper, as if the object wanted to be understood, but only little by little, almost like it was preparing for something, almost like it was waiting. And as the light curve painted its quiet heartbeat across every screen on Earth, one last thought began to form, first in whispers, then in silence. If this is a signal, who is it meant for? Humanity? How sooth? Another traveler? Something waiting near the sun? Or something even further away? Something we haven't discovered yet? No one knew. But the pulse kept breathing. And the deeper 3I/ATLAS moved into our solar system, the more its heartbeat began to feel less like a coincidence and more like a message we weren't ready to hear. But soon, we would have no choice, because the closer it came to the sun, the louder its heartbeat became. There are moments in science when the universe feels almost human, like it reacts, like it remembers, like it carries secrets in the way it warms and cools. And that's exactly what made the next discovery so disturbing. Because 3I/ATLAS, this frozen stranger drifting in from deep empty space, was acting like it remembered sunlight. It began with something small, a shift in temperature. At first, it seemed normal. Objects heat as they approach the sun. They cool when they drift away. Simple, predictable. But Atlas didn't follow the rules. It warmed up and then held that warmth. Too long, far too long, like a hand holding the memory of a flame. Scientists watched the thermal readings rise in a clean curve, then flatten out, like a living organism storing heat in its core. Then, minutes later, the temperature dropped. Not gradually, not like a cooling rock. It dropped in a sharp, timed burst, a release, almost like an exhale. Heat in. Heat out, steady, rhythmic, the same way a heart pumps blood, the same way lungs breathe, the same way a machine regulates its energy. It wasn't just strange, it was impossible. A comet doesn't hold and release heat like that. An asteroid doesn't build thermal patterns that lock into a schedule. Nothing from the empty dark between the stars should act like it remembers the last time light touched it. But 3I/ATLAS did, and it did it over and over and over again. Every time sunlight hit its surface, the warmth moved inward. Not randomly, but as if guided through channels or pathways buried under the dust. Then the object would cool in a clean pulse, the same timing every cycle, the same shape to the temperature curve. It was controlled. Some scientists were quiet for a long time, staring at the heat maps on their screens. You could see the confusion in their eyes. You could see the fear, because heat is information. And this object was processing it. One researcher said it felt like watching a memory fire in a brain. A sudden spark of energy followed by a controlled release. Another said it felt like the object was learning the sun's warmth, like it was absorbing something deeper than heat. Like it needed that energy for a purpose no one could understand, and maybe it did. As the days passed, the pattern grew clearer. Every thermal wave flowed through the object in the same direction, like a current following wiring. It didn't scatter randomly, like in a rock. It didn't fade unevenly. It followed a path that looked designed, engineered. Man-made objects, satellites, probes, reactors show similar thermal trails. Heat moves through them along specific routes, through materials meant to carry or store energy. That's what Atlas looked like. A cold machine warming itself for a reason. But what was that reason? What was it preparing for? Some thought the heat was powering something inside. Maybe a system awakening slowly after millions of years in the dark. Others believed it was regulating itself the same way spacecraft protect their instruments from freezing. A few whispered something even stranger, that the object was harvesting light, collecting it, saving it, keeping it alive inside. Like warmth mattered to it, like it was fuel. And that idea changed everything. Because fuel means intent. Fuel means purpose. Fuel means design. No natural object harvests energy on a timer, but machines do. And the fact that Atlas released heat in clean, deliberate bursts made it feel like something was happening inside. Something slow, something awakening. As if each pulse was a heartbeat of temperature, and each release was a breath. It almost felt biological. Something frozen, but not dead. Something old, but not lifeless. Something waiting, but not passive. The object's thermal memory became the focus of every major space agency. NASA ran simulations. ESA compared the heat curves to every known natural phenomenon. Nothing matched. Nothing even came close. The temperature wasn't reacting to sunlight. It was responding to it. Responding like a living system. Some researchers noticed another detail, one that tightened the knot in everyone's chest. The timing of the heat release lined up almost perfectly with the 11-minute light pulse discovered earlier. Light and heat. Pulse and release. Glow and cooling. Both following the same internal rhythm. Two systems dancing to the same beat. Two signals sharing the same clock. Like the object had an internal cycle, a timer, a heartbeat. It didn't matter whether you believed it was alive, mechanical, or something in between. Every new piece of data pushed it further outside the territory of anything we've ever seen. Because this wasn't just an anomaly. This was behavior. The object wasn't reacting to space. It was interacting with it, choosing when to hold warmth, choosing when to let it go, as if testing its own abilities. Like a creature stretching its limbs after a long sleep, like a machine powering up slowly, step by step. And with each thermal pulse, the sense of presence became stronger. There was something inside that object, something that could store energy like a memory, something that could regulate and control its own temperature, something that seemed to be waking up one breath at a time, but no one could agree on what it meant. Was it a system coming online? A part of its structure warming to life? A mechanism preparing for something at perihelion? Or was it trying to communicate, trying to speak through temperature? Because light wasn't enough? One thing was certain. No frozen wanderer from interstellar space should remember warmth. Not like this. Not in timed, controlled bursts. Not with a rhythm and structure that felt more conscious than chaotic. And the question that rose through every lab, every research center, every silent, sleepless room was always the same. Always whispered, never spoken loudly. Why does something so old, so cold, so far from any star, act like it remembers the last time it was warm? What kind of object carries thermal memory across the emptiness between suns? And what is it waking up for? As the object drifted closer to the sun, its internal patterns grew stronger and stranger, and the feeling that something was about to happen became impossible to ignore. Because if an object can remember warmth, maybe it can remember much more. And whatever it was preparing for, it wasn't done yet. Sometimes the universe gives you a clue. Not a loud one, not a dramatic explosion or a crash of stars, just a small detail, a shimmer, a flicker, something easy to miss unless you're really looking. And that's exactly how the next discovery began. With a shine. Astronomers were studying 3I-ATLAS through spectral scans, trying to understand what its surface was made of. They expected the usual things: dust, rock, frozen gas, the same ingredients every comet carries. But Atlas didn't behave like any comet, because its reflectivity, the way it bounced light, kept changing. Not slowly, not randomly, but in sharp, sudden shifts. One moment, its surface looked dull and grainy, like dark rock drifting through the void. The next moment, it gleamed, a bright flash, almost metallic, like sunlight reflecting off polished stone. It was too clean, too sharp, almost like a mirror turning toward the sun. At first, everyone assumed it was rotation. Comets spin. Their surfaces catch light at different angles. Easy explanation. But then came the frames that broke that theory into pieces. Because the reflections didn't match the object's spin, they didn't stay consistent with its movement. They appeared in places that shouldn't have been facing the sun, as if parts of the object were moving independently, like panels turning, like surfaces shifting, like something adjusting itself in real time. And that realization sent a cold wave through every control room on Earth. This wasn't just an odd shine, this was behavior. Some scientists zoomed in frame by frame, looking for cracks or fractures that could explain the changing light. But instead of rough, natural surfaces, they saw something far more unsettling. Edges, straight lines, angles, sharp boundaries that nature never draws. One researcher described it like this: it was the kind of geometry you only see in machines, not in comets. Others stared quietly at the screens, unable to process what they were seeing. Because there's a rule in astronomy: nothing from interstellar space should show clean, engineered lines. But Atlas did. At higher resolution, some parts of the surface almost looked layered. Thin plates stacked on top of one another, shifting slightly, catching the sun at precise angles, like shutters opening, like armor plates adjusting, like a mechanism waking up. And suddenly, that strange shimmer didn't feel harmless anymore. It felt coordinated. They ran more spectral scans, to be sure. And the results were even stranger. The reflectivity followed patterns, patterns that lined up with the light pulses, patterns that matched the heat releases, patterns linked to the object's orbit corrections. Light, heat, movement, all in sync. All sharing the same silent rhythm, almost like the object had an internal system, a feedback loop, a design. The more they stared, the more the surface of Atlas began to feel like a shell, not a solid chunk of rock, but a structure, something built to endure the emptiness between stars. But what kind of structure? Some frames showed long, clean strips, like metal sheets bent around a curve. Others poured what looked like hexagonal patterns, not natural ones, but perfect, repeating shapes. Shapes that reminded people of spacecraft shielding, solar panel arrays, radiator plates. Human engineering suddenly felt small in comparison. The deeper they looked, the more the object's surface resembled a machine worn down by time, covered in dust, coated in debris, camouflaged by 1,000 years of drifting through black silence, but still intact, still steady, still functioning enough to shift and reflect the sun. And if it could shift, it could move, it could react, it could decide. The darkest thought lingering in the room was simple. If these panels are rotating, then something inside is controlling them. But the question was even bigger than that, because if the panels were real, someone made them. Someone designed them. Someone sent them out into the void. What kind of civilization builds something that can survive interstellar travel? What kind of mind creates a machine that remembers heat, pulses with light, and corrects its own orbit? And why would that machine come here? As the reflectivity anomaly spread across every major observatory, teams tried one last attempt to explain it away. Maybe the sharp edges were tricks of light. Maybe the patterns were coincidences. Maybe the shifting panels were just odd surface features we didn't understand. People wanted it to be natural. They needed it to be natural. Because the alternative was too big. But every new scan crushed those hopes. The reflections weren't random. They happened at precise intervals. They matched the object's internal cycle, the same mysterious rhythm controlling its pulse and heat. It was all connected. One cycle, one heartbeat, one design. Atlas wasn't just reflecting sunlight. It was controlling sunlight, redirecting it, absorbing it, using it, like wings catching the first rise of wind, like sails adjusting to a star they'd been waiting to see again. As the object neared perihelion, the reflections grew more dramatic. Larger surfaces revealed themselves, long, flat shapes that glinted like polished metal hiding under a mask of dust. Engineers studying the footage felt something strange inside their chest, a mixture of awe and fear, because no man-made object had ever shown such perfect ancient geometry. Nothing we've built could survive the journey this object had taken. And the thought no one could ignore was this: if we found something with cleaner engineering than our own, what does that say about the ones who built it? What kind of intelligence leaves a machine drifting between suns, waiting silently in darkness, until it finds us? And why now? Why this moment? Why this star? The reflectivity anomaly didn't just challenge science, it challenged identity. Because when you see panels turning on a comet, when you see geometry cut sharper than knives, when you see structures hidden beneath ancient dust, you're forced to wonder, are we looking at an object from space, or are we looking at something that was meant to be found? A message? A relic? A probe? A survivor? No one knew. But the sharp edges were real. The shifting panels were real. And whatever Atlas was, it wasn't a rock. As it drifted closer to the sun, the dust began to thin, revealing more of the structure beneath. And for the first time, humanity began to see the true shape of the thing approaching our star, a shape that would change everything, because the next discovery was even stranger and far more dangerous. There are sounds in the universe we're not meant to hear, faint hums hiding behind static, soft notes buried in endless noise, signals so thin that most of the time they go unnoticed. But not this time. It started late at night in a quiet radio observatory, the kind where the only sound is wind brushing against metal and the slow, steady heartbeat of machines listening to the sky. A team was scanning 3 3I-ATLAS, hoping to match its strange light pulse with something in the radio spectrum. They expected nothing, just background noise. But then they caught something. A tone, a whisper, a thin repeating signal hiding so deep inside the static that the computer almost ignored it. Almost. The signal was soft. So soft that most people wouldn't even call it a signal. It was more like a breath. A tiny rise in the noise, barely enough to notice. But it repeated. It always repeated. And worse, it repeated in perfect rhythm with Atlas's 11-minute light pulse. Light, heat, reflectivity, and now radio waves, all following the same silent heartbeat. No one said it out loud, but everyone in the room felt the same cold shiver. Something was speaking. They isolated the frequency, filtered it, magnified it. The tone grew clearer, the faint musical hum, rising and falling like the soft note of a distant instrument, not random, not chaotic, purposeful. But nobody dared to call it a message, because that word carries weight. That word changes everything. So instead, they called it an anomaly, a harmless word, a word that hides fear behind science. But inside every researcher, the fear was real, because the signal didn't act like natural radio noise. It wasn't a flare. It wasn't electromagnetic interference. It wasn't caused by solar wind or radiation or dust or anything that made sense. It was synced, timed, alive. The more they listened, the stranger it became. Every time the object pulsed with light, the signal appeared. A thin hum, always the same pitch, always the same duration. Like a note playing in a song only the object could hear. Hours passed. Scientists across the world tuned their antennas to the same frequency, hoping to learn more. And that's when things got even stranger. Because the moment more telescopes pointed at Atlas, the signal stopped. Not faded, not weakened. Stopped, like someone flipped a switch. The hum vanished, leaving only silence. The light pulses continued. The heat cycles continued. The reflectivity pattern continued. But the whisper in the radio spectrum was gone. People stared at their screens in disbelief. They checked their cables, their detectors, their software. Everything was working. It wasn't their equipment that changed. It was Atlas. The moment it felt watched, it went quiet, like an animal hiding in tall grass, like a voice stopping mid-sentence when the door opens. Hours later, when most teams gave up and pointed their antennas elsewhere, the signal returned, soft, gentle, repeating, the exact same tone, the exact same rhythm, but only when fewer people were listening, only when the attention faded, only when the object felt alone again. That one detail shifted the mood across every observatory on Earth. Because signals don't care if they're being listened to, but intelligence does. And that possibility, that whisper of awareness, sent a ripple of panic through the scientific community. If this wasn't a natural signal, if it responded to observation, then what were they hearing? What kind of object knows when it's being watched? Some scientists suggested it was a glitch, that too many antennas created interference. Others argued that the object's structure might reflect radio waves in strange ways. But deep down, nobody believed those explanations. Not really, because interference doesn't follow a perfect 11-minute rhythm. Surface reflections don't pause when attention increases. Random noise doesn't come back only when you stop looking. This felt personal. This felt intentional. And that terrified everyone. One researcher described it like this. It felt like the object was whispering until it realized we were trying to listen. Another said it felt like a creature making a sound in the dark, but going silent the moment a flashlight shines in its direction. The signal wasn't strong enough to decode. No patterns, no language, no structure, just a single, quiet tone, like the universe breathing through a narrow doorway. But the absence of complexity didn't make it safer. In fact, it made it worse. The simplicity felt deliberate, like something testing its environment, like a probe checking if anyone was listening, like a voice saying, "I'm here," but only when unobserved. And the biggest question, the one that kept people awake at night, was the one nobody wanted to say out loud. Is the whisper meant for us, or for something else? A warning? A call? A beacon waiting for a reply that never came? Or was it simply a system warming up? A machine stretching its voice after millions of years of silence? Scientists began recording every appearance of the tone, hoping to find even the smallest clue. And they did. The pitch drifted by a tiny fraction each time. Just enough to be noticeable. Not random drift, not technical error. A rise, then a fall, then a rise again. Like the object was tuning itself, learning, adjusting, trying to find clarity, trying to speak. But the moment anyone pushed harder, more antennas, more power, more attention, the whisper died again, every single time. The silence felt intentional. Like ATLAS understood it was being interrogated, like it refused to speak under pressure. Nobody knew what to make of it. Was the object afraid? Was it hiding? Was it protecting itself? Or was it designed to avoid being analyzed too closely? And the most unsettling question was the simplest. If the object can sense attention, what else can it sense? Heat, light, movement, signals, spacecraft, or even thought? As 3I-ATLAS drifted deeper toward the sun, the whispered radio tone continued its strange pattern, appearing only in the quiet, disappearing the moment humanity tried to reach for it. It felt like a boundary, a line we weren't supposed to cross, a message we weren't meant to hear yet. And as the world watched the object approach its most critical point, a thought echoed through every mind following the story. If this whisper is a signal, then what happens when the object finally decides to speak clearly? And, more importantly, who or what will be listening? There is a kind of quiet in the universe that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels intentional, heavy, like someone closing a door, softly but firmly, and that is the silence 3I-ATLAS created. Everything had been building, the pulses, the heat cycles, the shifting panels, the whispered signal, a rhythm, a heartbeat, a presence that felt more alive with every passing hour. But the moment the object crossed the ecliptic plane, the invisible sheet of space where most planets orbit the sun, everything stopped, not slowed, not flickered, not faded. Stopped. Perfect silence. A silence that felt too complete to be natural. The light pulses vanished. The thermal memory went flat. The reflective panels froze in place. The whispered radio tone fell dead. 1 second, the object felt like a living machine. The next, it felt like a stone. Researchers around the world watched the graphs drop to zero in real time. Lines that had been dancing for days suddenly flattened. Screens that once glowed with chaotic beauty now looked empty, like the universe had hit pause. At first, no one believed it. They thought the instruments had failed, all of them, at the exact same moment. They rebooted systems, checked backups, swapped detectors. Nothing changed. Atlas was silent. The ecliptic plane isn't special. It's just the sun's highway, the thin path where the major planets orbit. Comets cross it all the time. Asteroids pass through it without a whisper. But 3I-ATLAS, it shut itself down the moment it touched that invisible boundary. Why? What was the object reacting to? Was it a natural trigger? A gravitational threshold? A temperature change? Or was it something artificial? A programmed rule? A line in space the object wasn't meant to cross, a wake. The more scientists studied the silence, the heavier it became. Because the object wasn't dead. Its path continued. Its speed held steady. Its shape didn't crumble. Only its strange behavior disappeared. One researcher said it felt like watching a creature go limp the moment a spotlight hits it. Another said it felt like the object was holding its breath. Others whispered the word nobody wanted to use: hiding. It made sense in a way that felt wrong. If the pulses were signals, if the heat cycles were energy, if the panels were mechanisms, if the whispered tone was communication, then shutting everything down at the same moment could only mean one thing. It didn't want to be detected. It didn't want to be understood. It was hiding. But from who? From us? From something else? From something waiting ahead? Some scientists believed the ecliptic acted like a curtain, a region where signals are easier to spot. With Earth, Mars, Venus, and multiple probes all watching at the same time, the object might have felt exposed. Because the closer it came to this crowded region of space, the more eyes were on it. The more telescopes pointed its way. The more antennas listened for its whisper. Maybe the object sensed this. Maybe it didn't want to reveal itself too soon. But others had a darker thought. What if crossing the ecliptic wasn't the trigger? What if what lies beyond it was... Because as Atlas passed through the plane, it wasn't entering emptiness. It was heading toward the inner system, toward the planets, toward the sun, toward us. Maybe the silence wasn't fear. Maybe it was preparation. Nothing about the object's shutdown felt chaotic. Every system stopped in perfect sync, the same way they had activated in sync. The heartbeat of light vanished. The breath of heat steadied. The shifting panels locked into place with a precision that felt coldly deliberate. It was like watching a machine fold into itself. Compact, still, hidden. A dormant seed drifting through darkness. And yet, even in its silence, something felt wrong. Too perfect, too complete, too calm. Objects don't react to the ecliptic plane. There is no physical reason to do so, no temperature jump, no radiation spike, no gravitational wall. But Atlas reacted like the plane mattered, like it was entering a zone where silence was safer than sound. Some experts wondered if the object was following a rule set long before it reached our solar system, a rule written into its structure, a rule triggered by star positions, light angles, or cosmic geometry, a rule that told it, when you cross this line, be quiet. But why? Was it avoiding detection from Earth, or avoiding something else entirely? A probe? A signal? a watcher we haven't discovered yet. As hours turned into days, the silence continued. Not a single pulse, not a single shimmer of unusual heat, not a single whisper in the radio band. It was as if the object had fallen into a deep, dreamless sleep. But it didn't drift like something asleep. Its path remained precise. Its speed remained measured. Its trajectory held a perfect line around the sun. Silence did not mean surrender. Silence meant choice. It was choosing not to reveal anything more. And that choice scared everyone. Because if the object could turn off all its signals, then it could turn them back on. Anytime, anywhere, for any reason. The silence felt like the moment before a storm, that heavy pause right before the sky opens up. The kind of pause that makes you wonder if something is waiting, or watching, or preparing. And as 3I-ATLAS continued its slow journey past the ecliptic, one question echoed across every observatory, every lab, every mind following the story. Is the anomaly hiding, waiting for the sun, waiting for a signal, waiting for us, or waiting for something we can't even imagine? No one knew. But the closer the object drifted towards the heart of our solar system, the more you could feel a truth rising in the background. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is intention. And the object, whatever it was, had chosen this moment to go dark, because the next thing it did would not be hidden. The quiet was only the start. There are places in space where light fails, not because it's weak, but because something stands between it and the truth. And in that thin moment, that brief, fleeting second when 3I-ATLAS slipped into the sun's shadow, something impossible happened. It began as a dim outline, a soft glow, a breath of light where there should have been total darkness. Astronomers expected the object to vanish completely when it crossed behind the sun. No sunlight, no reflection, just a silhouette drifting through the void. But instead, it shined. A faint inner light began to bloom from beneath its dusty shell. Not bright, not explosive, just steady, like embers glowing under ash. The first person to see it didn't speak for several seconds. They just stared, trying to understand how something could glow without a star. And slowly, painfully, the shape of the object changed. Not physically, but visually, because the light coming from inside wasn't random. It wasn't scattered. It outlined something beneath the dust. Symmetry, lines, angles, curves too smooth, too perfect, too intentional to be natural. For the first time, humanity saw the skeleton beneath the stone. The dust that coated the object was thin in some places, thicker in others, and the inner glow slipped through those gaps like a lantern shining through cracks in ancient armor. And through those cracks, we saw structure. You could see long, parallel beams, circular arcs, geometric panels arranged like rib bones around a central core. Nothing chaotic, nothing broken, nothing shaped by chance. This wasn't a rock. This was a design, something built, something engineered, and something that had been hiding under layers of dust for millions, maybe billions, of years. The glow didn't flicker like fire. It didn't hum like electricity. It was soft, patient, warm in a way that made no sense in the vacuum of space. Almost like a heartbeat. Almost like breath. Almost like the object was alive inside, and the shadow gave it permission to show its true face. For days, scientists had watched the object shut down all activity. The pulses, the heat bursts, the radio whisper. The ecliptic crossing silenced everything. But now, in the darkness behind the sun, it woke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in a way that felt intimate, like a creature opening one eye in the dark to see if it was finally alone. The inner glow pulsed faintly, not in the 11-minute cycle this time, but in shorter breaths, soft waves, a slow rhythm, as if the machine beneath the shell was warming up, testing itself, stretching after a long sleep. Some scientists compared it to a nuclear reactor, beginning ignition. Others said it looked like bioluminescence, the glow you see deep in the ocean where sunlight never reaches. But everyone agreed on one thing. The light didn't come from the sun. It came from the object. Energy radiating from the inside out. Energy that had nothing to do with heat, or reflection, or any natural process humans understood. One engineer said the structure reminded them of spacecraft frames, the way support beams are arranged to protect something delicate at the center. If that was true, then what was Atlas protecting? The glow grew slowly, outlining more of the internal structure, and the more it revealed, the more frightening it became. Because this wasn't just a random set of beams and panels. This was architecture. Circular rings stacked inside one another, radial arms extending from a central core, segments arranged with a precision no natural object could ever shape. A machine with purpose. A machine with memory. A machine with a history older than our sun. And for a moment, as the glow deepened, it almost felt like the object was revealing itself on purpose, as if the shadow, the temporary freedom from being watched by Earth, allowed it to breathe again, allowed it to become itself. One scientist whispered something that would haunt everyone who read the transcript. It's like it only wakes when we're not looking. A terrifying idea, but one that fit the pattern. The light pulses existed until more telescopes tracked them. The whispered signal appeared only when fewer antennas listened. The heat cycles reacted to attention. The reflectivity anomaly vanished when scanning increased, and now, inside a moment of privacy, hidden by the sun, it glowed. If the object could sense observation, react to it, hide from it, then what was it capable of when left alone? The glow reached a peak just before the object slipped out of the shadow, and in that moment, every hidden structure became clear. The ribs, the plates, the rings, the central chamber. A chamber so geometrically perfect that scientists froze when they saw it. It looked like a containment unit, a capsule, a core, something meant to hold, or protect, or preserve. But preserve what? A system, a message, a memory, a passenger. When sunlight touched the object again, everything vanished. The glow, the outline, the internal shape. It all faded as instantly as it had appeared, swallowed by the same dusty shell that had hidden the truth for so long. Light washed over it, and the object became ordinary again, a dull, silent wanderer, a frozen stone drifting through space. But the people who saw the glow could never unsee it, never unknow what hid beneath that surface. A structure older than planets, a machine tougher than stars, a design too careful to be random. Something was inside Atlas, sleeping, waiting, awakening only in darkness, where no eyes could follow. The brief glimpse changed the entire investigation, because now the question wasn't whether Atlas was natural or artificial. That debate was over. The real question, the one hanging in the air like a storm cloud, was this: what machine sleeps inside this interstellar shell? And more importantly, what happens when it wakes fully? Because the object wasn't finished. Its silence was ending. Its journey was almost complete. And what came next would be the most disturbing discovery yet. Sometimes the universe speaks in straight lines, not in words, not in symbols, but in paths, trajectories, directions carved through space like quiet intentions. And when scientists traced the path of 3I-ATLAS, they found something no one expected, something no one wanted to believe. Because the object didn't drift into our solar system. It didn't fall toward the sun by chance. It wasn't pushed by gravity or thrown here by a dying star. It aimed. A perfect line. A line that cuts across millions of years of darkness straight toward us. The first person who plotted its origin sat completely still for almost a full minute. The simulation kept running on the screen. Numbers falling backward in time. Trajectory lines stretching farther and farther out. Past planets, past comets, past the edge of our system. And then past the edge of everything familiar. The line kept going. Not wobbling, not curving, just straight. Too straight. Objects traveling through deep space always show signs of chaos, tiny nudges from dust clouds, gravitational ripples, collisions, drift, spin. But the path of Atlas looked like something drawn with a ruler, a deliberate shot across the void. And the deeper researchers traced it, the stranger it became, because the line didn't point toward a star or a cluster, or a nebula, or anything that would make sense. It pointed toward nothing, a dark region of space with no suns, no planets, no heat, no light, a place astronomers barely studied because there was nothing to study. But now, this nothing had sent us something, and that realization settled into the room like a weight no one knew how to carry. One researcher whispered, "Why would anything come from there?" Another replied, "Why would anything go there?" No one had an answer. The region Atlas came from is so empty, so cold, so silent, that even galaxies avoid it. It's a cosmic desert, the loneliest part of the universe we've ever mapped. And yet, somehow, that is where the object began its journey. But began isn't the right word. Not anymore, because if the path is that straight, it means something launched it. It means this wasn't a wandering rock drifting for eons. It was sent, shot across space like a message, or a seed, or a probe. And suddenly, the mystery turned into something much larger, something terrifying in its simplicity. If someone sent Atlas, then someone exists out there. Someone capable of building a machine that can cross interstellar space. Someone with technology older than our species, smarter than anything we've ever seen, patient enough to wait millions of years for a target, and powerful enough to aim a machine from the emptiest part of the universe straight toward the sun. The next discovery only made things worse. Because when scientists plotted the object's path relative to our solar system's position over time, the alignment was exact, precise, coldly intentional. Atlas didn't just aim for our star, it aimed for us, at the moment humanity would exist, at the exact era when our technology would be advanced enough to detect it and shocked enough to fear it. The odds of that happening naturally are so small they're practically zero. This wasn't nature. This wasn't luck. This was choice. The trajectory data became the most protected file on the planet. Security teams guarded it. Agencies fought for access. People whispered theories in hallways, afraid to be overheard. Because once you know the object was aimed, you can't unknow it. The question grew heavier, each day. Who would send something like this? And why hide its origin in darkness? Why launch it from a place where no civilization should exist? Why send it across a void so empty it barely counts as part of the universe? Unless the darkness wasn't emptiness, unless the absence wasn't a mistake. Some began to wonder if the dark region was chosen for a reason. A hiding place, a shield, a way to mask the launch of something ancient. Others suggested something far more disturbing. Maybe the region isn't empty. Maybe the region is home to something we can't detect, something that doesn't emit light, something that doesn't want to be seen. A civilization older than stars, a species evolved beyond biology, a construct born in darkness, comfortable in silence, a species that doesn't need light, or warmth, or planets, a species that builds machines like Atlas. One scientist described it like this: maybe light is our home, maybe darkness is theirs. The idea spread fast, whispered in labs, in observatories, in late-night calls between researchers who couldn't sleep anymore. If something intelligent exists in that void, it wouldn't use light as we do. It wouldn't need a sun. It wouldn't evolve like us. It would be shaped by the dark, born in it, thriving in it. And perhaps it built Atlas to explore the regions of the universe where stars do exist, where life like ours might live. And maybe we weren't the first it found. The path of the object traced a straight line, but nobody knew how long it had been traveling. Millions of years? Billions? Longer? If Atlas was launched when the Earth was young, then whatever built it may not even exist anymore. Or worse, it may exist exactly as it did then, unchanged, eternal, waiting in that cold region we call empty. The more the researchers studied the origin map, the more it felt like they were staring at a secret the universe had tried to hide, a message written in geometry, a warning disguised as a machine, a visitor from a place we're not meant to see. But the question echoing in every mind wasn't about the path. It wasn't even about the darkness where Atlas began. It was about the intention. What kind of intelligence launches something from the empty parts of the universe? A desperate one? A curious one? A dying one? A powerful one? Or something beyond those words entirely? Something that sees us not as equals, but as an experiment, as something to observe, to study, to approach carefully. We thought Atlas was coming into our world, but maybe we've been drifting into its path all along. And as the object drew closer to the sun, closer to its real destination, one truth became impossible to ignore. Whatever launched this did not choose us by accident. There are moments when the universe feels like it's clearing its throat, as if something old, something buried, is preparing to speak. And as 3I-ATLAS reached perihelion, its closest point to the sun, that feeling became impossible to ignore, because the silence ended, slowly at first. A faint pulse, a soft rise in brightness, a tiny jump in heat. But then everything changed. The object came alive. The heartbeat that had vanished weeks before returned. Not weak, not hesitant, but stronger, sharper, louder than ever. 11 minutes became 9. 9 became 7. The pulse was accelerating. And with every new wave of light, the heat inside the object climbed like a slow-burning fire, waking from a long winter. For days, scientists had watched Atlas drift towards the sun like a dead thing. cold, quiet, still. But the moment it crossed a certain invisible threshold, a distance only the object seemed to care about, its entire body responded. Panels that had been frozen in place began to shift beneath the dust. Not randomly, not chaotically, they unfolded. They opened, they aligned, like wings catching their first breath of wind, and the light from within. The glow, first seen only in shadow, now leaked through seams that hadn't been visible before. Lines of brightness, curves of radiance, patterns so symmetrical they looked like the veins of a machine awakening after a sleep older than human history. One scientist described it as watching a chrysalis crack open, but instead of a creature inside, there was geometry. Clean, sharp, precise. No comet in the universe behaves like that. No rock rotates plates like joints. No asteroid unfolds panels in perfect synchrony. No natural object awakens in stages, reacting to the sun like it's recognizing an old friend or an old command. Heat readings spiked, not in messy bursts, but in smooth, regulated waves, the kind of heat curve you'd see in an engine warming up, a system calibrating itself, a core activating layer by layer. Engineers compared the pattern to reactors powering on. Astronomers compared it to stars flaring from within. But no matter what analogy they used, the truth felt the same. Something inside Atlas was turning itself on, and it was doing so with intention. The object's outer dust began to fall away, pushed off by vibrations no one could fully explain. Tiny particles drifted into space, like ash shaken off ancient armor, revealing more of the structure beneath. Long, smooth segments, hexagonal plates, ridges arranged with mathematical precision. A design so old, yet so advanced, it made human spacecraft look like toys. The pulses grew brighter, the heat climbed faster, the plates shifted wider. It wasn't random movement, it was opening. But for what? Was it absorbing sunlight? Charging itself? Completing a sequence that had started millions of years ago? Every possibility felt terrifying. Because if this object had been asleep, it had chosen this moment, this exact point in space, to wake up. Not 1,000,000 miles earlier, not 1,000,000 miles later, but here, right next to our star. A moment mapped into its path long before humans existed. As temperatures climbed, the symmetry inside the object became clearer. Rings, columns, internal spokes that all connected toward a central chamber, the same chamber that glowed inside the shadow. Only now the glow was brighter, stronger, like something was stirring inside. The core pulsed in rhythm with the external light. Every flash seemed to ripple outward, through the plates, through the dust, through the space around it. It felt alive, not alive like us, not biological, not emotional, alive like a machine with purpose, alive like a system fulfilling a command, alive like something remembering what it was built to do. One astrophysicist whispered, "It's not awakening because of the sun. It's awakening for the sun." And that idea shook everyone, because that meant the object wasn't reacting to heat. It wasn't responding to gravity. It wasn't waking by accident. It was waiting for this exact alignment, for this exact distance, for this exact moment when sunlight hit it at the perfect angle. A moment planned long before Earth formed. A moment older than human language, older than human dreams. The pulses grew so bright that some telescopes had to shield their senses. The heat signatures became so intense that models began predicting internal temperatures too high for any natural structure to survive. But Atlas did survive. Not just survive, it thrived. The closer it came to the sun, the more alive it became. Light exploded across its surface in patterns. Spirals, lines, grids, the kind of shapes you'd expect from circuitry, not from rock. The plates rotated into new positions, snapping into alignment with audible vibrations picked up by long-range instruments. Whatever was inside was preparing. For what? No one knew. A release, a transformation, a message, or something far more dangerous. The object's motion changed too. Tiny shifts in trajectory, so precise they had to be controlled by something internal. Like the object was steering, aiming, positioning itself in the exact place it needed to be. And the thought that haunted everyone was this: what if Atlas wasn't just waking up? What if it was arriving? What if this, perihelion, was its destination? Its purpose? The moment it had been traveling toward for millions of years? What if the sun wasn't just a star to it, but a trigger? A key? A signal that told it, now. The heat peaked, the light surged, the plates locked into their final positions, and then, deep inside the object, the central core flared with a brightness so pure, so focused, that some researchers felt their breath stop. A core that looked less like a chamber and more like an engine. An engine powering up after an eternity of silence. The entire object pulsed as one. One heartbeat, one breath, one awakening. And for the first time, humanity understood the real scale of what they were witnessing. This wasn't a comet. This wasn't a rock. This wasn't a visitor. This was a machine waiting for the sun, a machine older than Earth, a machine that had been asleep for millions of years, waiting for this exact moment, and the next thing it did would change everything. There are moments in science that feel like the universe closing a book, softly, quietly, right before you reach the last page. And this was one of those moments, because after all the pulses, all the heat, all the shifting plates and glowing veins inside the object, 3I-ATLAS suddenly went silent again. Not slowly, not fading, just stopped. Every signal vanished in a single breath. The heartbeat of light fell flat. The rising heat collapsed to cold. The shifting panels froze in place. The core dimmed until it was darker than space itself. It was as if the object had shut its eyes. After days of awakening, after revealing pieces of itself no human was meant to see, the machine simply turned off, frozen, silent, dead. Some scientists stared at the sudden drop in data like it was a personal attack. Hours of monitoring, days of sleepless nights, endless questions, all erased by a single, merciless flat line. Others felt something stranger, a quiet sadness, as if they had been watching a creature take its first breath in millions of years, only to watch it slip back into an unending sleep. But one thing was different this time. The silence didn't feel defensive. It felt final, like the object had completed whatever it came to do. And now it was done. Astronomers rechecked everything: power systems, telescopes, antennas. They pointed every instrument they had at the object. Nothing. Atlas drifted in perfect stillness, no longer adjusting its path, no longer reacting to the sun, no longer listening or responding. It was a dark, cold shell again. as if someone had flipped its last switch. But just when people began accepting the silence, just when they began to step back, exhausted, defeated, someone noticed something small, something quiet, something the object had left behind. A pattern etched into the dust on its surface, not glowing, not pulsing, just sitting there in the stillness, like a final whisper the universe had forgotten to hide. A spiral, perfect, precise, drawn with a mathematical beauty so clean, so intentional, that no natural process could have shaped it. A spiral that pointed outward, not toward the sun, not toward its own trajectory, not toward Earth, outward into deep space. The moment the spiral was confirmed, the silence in mission control rooms became heavier than anything before. Because the spiral wasn't chaos. It wasn't random. It wasn't a crack or a fracture. It was geometry. A message written in dust. Some argued it might be an accident, that plates shifting during the awakening created a shape by chance, but those arguments died quickly. The spiral's proportions matched no natural pattern, not cracks, not stress lines, not heat fractures, not cometary features. It was too perfect, too deliberate. And the orientation, the way it pointed, felt intentional in a way that made people's stomachs twist. Because the spiral wasn't pointed toward any star. It wasn't aligned with Atlas's path. It wasn't aimed at anything familiar. It pointed into darkness, into the same empty region where the object had come from. A direction humans had always ignored because there was nothing there. But maybe that nothing is exactly what mattered. Some scientists believed the spiral was a warning, a sign saying, "Do not follow me. Do not look where I came from. Do not seek what built me." A warning to stay away from the darkness, to leave the void untouched, to accept that some corners of the universe are meant to remain unvisited. A different group believed the opposite. To them, the spiral looked like an invitation, a map, a trail pointing towards something the object wanted us to find. "Follow this path," they said. "Come and see what lies beyond the stars. Discover the place I was born." And that idea was even more terrifying. Because what kind of intelligence leaves a trail for a younger species to follow? One that wants to help? Or one that wants to be found? Or one that wants to test us? Yet another group believed the message wasn't for us at all. That the spiral was a signal meant for something, or someone else. Something waiting in the void. Something the object belonged to. Something it was calling out to. But no matter which theory people believed, one truth hung over every conversation. The spiral was intentional. It was the final act of a machine with purpose. A purpose we were never meant to fully understand. Some scientists felt a deep ache when they realized this might be the last sign the object ever gave. Others felt relief. The fear of what else Atlas might do had kept them awake for weeks, but everyone felt something else too. A sense of being watched. A sense that the object's silence wasn't emptiness, but waiting. As if the spiral wasn't a message in the way we think of messages, but a question. A question aimed not at our technology, but at our curiosity. A question meant to linger in our minds long after the object drifted away. Will you follow? A simple question, a dangerous one, because following it would mean sending a probe, or, one day, a ship into the darkest part of the universe. A place without stars, without warmth, without answers. A place where something built Atlas and sent it across the cosmos, for reasons we still can't understand. As Atlas continued its silent drift through space, cold and unmoving, it left humanity with more questions than truth. Was the spiral a warning? A sign to turn back before we discover something we're not ready to face? Or was it an invitation, a doorway to a civilization that lives in darkness, calling us forward into a place we've never dared to look? The object offered no answer, no pulse, no whisper, no heat. Just silence, the kind of silence that feels like a hand pulling away. Like a story ending mid-sentence. Like a goodbye that carries more weight than words ever could. And the universe, quiet, endless, uncaring, swallowed the silence whole, leaving us with a final haunting truth. The machine didn't come to explain itself. It came to leave a question that may define the future of our species. Do we follow the spiral? Or do we pretend we never saw it? The universe won't tell us. The machine won't speak again. The decision is ours.